Uh, Hey, hello guys. Uh, am I audible?
Yeah,
Yeah, hi Thomas.
yes, yes.
Yeah.
Hey, hey. Uh, Thank you all for joining. We just started, so we will wait for some time. If you, we do see a little participation, but there are many people actually fill the form. Maybe we'll wait for a couple of minutes, or maybe we will give it a 5 minute period, and then we will start. Okay.
Okay,
Sure,
All
yeah.
of your, so this basically, this session is basically for public to address, so we will be addressing the queries you have with Palo Alto firewalls, and like if you have any scenarios or issues that can be asked here, we can discuss that each issue, and we will provide the guidance. uh, okay, this will be that. So come up with your queries, note down your queries, the scenarios, and you can ask one by one.
okay.
Yeah, Chandrasekhar, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I have it. I'm noting it. Give me 2 minutes.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So we'll wait for
So,
a couple of minutes. Yeah,
Thomas, I have one query.
yeah.
Hello, shall I ask?
We are yet to begin. If it's a Palo Alto query, we'll wait for few people to join.
Okay,
Yeah, we expect some more people, but we don't see all of them. So we'll wait. Just note down all that query you have. We'll address it.
okay.
Okay. Thank you. So, all right. Uh, I think we waited for 5 minutes. We have people joined. Uh, so we may start. Right, we need.
Sure, Sajjan.
So
All
yeah.
right.
So myself, Sajjan. Sorry. Yeah. Yeah.
Go ahead. Go ahead. Please.
Yeah, myself, Sajjan Thomas. I was an extract before in Palo Alto. Then I moved out. And with me, I have Vineet Bhaskar. Vineet, you can
Sure.
introduce.
So, hey everyone, my name is Vineet Bhaskaran. Right. I was with Palo Alto TAC as well. Right. For over 2.7 years. I moved out again. Like Sajjan. So, that's right. I mean, I've been in the industry for 7 years. Right. Specialized in network security. So, right, this is going to be an interactive session, right? We want to have this as a Q&A sessions for everyone, right? To have a discussion, healthy discussion on Palo Alto topics, right? Any issues that you have, right? And what are the important, right, technologies or features inside PA, right? And we just want to pitch our idea, right, on the training part, right? What that we do, right? So just want to see right how the industry is panning out, right? Yeah, how people are getting a clear understanding of the product, right? If there are any open questions that you guys have, right? Ideally, what we come across in the industry is that right there is huge demand for Palo Alto firewall engineers right now because they're the leaders in right the on-prem firewall industry, but the problem is that right with these openings it comes to a state where people know Palo Alto, they might know to configure it, right? But the troubleshooting part, right, or when they get a problem, right, it's difficult for them to troubleshoot it or get it fixed, right? And they ultimately reach out to tech, right? So what we are trying to do is to cover that gap, right? Give you a detailed understanding of the firewall feature, right? Right, based on labs, as well as take up all kinds of troubleshooting sessions, right? So that you guys have a clear way how to navigate to a problem, right? It's not just Palo Alto. This troubleshooting idea is common for any vendor, right? I mean, let it be any firewall that you take, right? When you have an access issue, right? How do you troubleshoot? Or what is the L1, L2, L3 levels of troubleshooting, right? And ultimately, if you're not able to solve it, right, you end up going to the track, right, for any vendor as such, right? So that's what right we are trying to achieve. So we want to have right maximum participation just to see right what are the main pain points that right people like you guys right who are doing excellent work on the industry have, right, and then taking some feedback also, right, address all of that, right. Yes, Arjun, go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. So we just started. So we were. So we actually also provide some training. So our first batch has completed, and we got a good feedback. So we this is our first going public. So we just wanna take the feedback as well, and to know where people are standing and what are the common queries. So we can address all those through our channels or personal touch as well. We can help you. So this is our goal to reach maximum people and address their queries or issues. uh, yeah. So yes, so I believe I think we can start with each one of your queries. uh, Anybody can start from the your you can raise a hand and then you can ask that question, so one by one we'll go.
Yeah, but that's it, go ahead.
Just there, yeah.
Hi, I would like to thanks first of all of you guys. And Vineet, I'm really very much fan of you. I have gone through the videos which is already shared in. I'm working right now in Movate, formerly CSS Corp.
Mm-hmm.
So
Right.
yes, I have gone through your videos and that helped me a lot. Although that I haven't learned that much concepts clearly in that I mean in the live training at office, but when I gone through these videos and I have learned most of the things, most of the concepts, but still I'm having I mean a lot of confusions, especially with the user ID and the routing part, and also panorama,
Mm-hmm.
and and many other things. I have noted down those points on my notebook. So that's what I want to say. And if we are going to start with the confusions, my first question would be like, you have given, I mean, in that training, I mean, or with the present, uh, I mean, scenarios, taking cases, there are a lot of commands we used to use in troubleshooting. I want to know, I mean, like, command specifications, like what is the application of that particular command, like, you know, which we are using in like packet diagnostics, and in like in other scenarios like sessions, we are using the commands to get the output from it. So like that.
All right. Yeah. So right. To just summarize that question, right? So
Mhm.
the idea here, right, it is to have an understanding, a holistic understanding of the CLI commands, right? So
Correct.
Palo Alto is a more GUI friendly, right, firewall that admins prefer to go for the right UI, right, most of the time, right. CLI is something that right, people refrain from doing. Why? Because it's hard, one thing, right, and but very difficult to remember, right, large commands, right, and it will vary depending on vendor to vendor, right, which is a tedious job. So one thing, right, I think as a positive from Palo Alto perspective is their documentation, right? They have a good knowledge base, right, which contains a lot of articles, which documents a lot of such commands, right? So if you take user ID troubleshooting or IPsec troubleshooting, there are right commands with detailed descriptions and probably outputs of those commands showing you how, right, or what this command means and how to interpret it, right? But I think the major challenge is there is no like a handbook, right, or a playbook for the CLI commands, right? Whereas in Cisco and all, right, there are internal documentations on the firewall CLI itself where you can pull information about what this command does, right? So compared to that, right here, the inclination towards GUI is true, right? But the CLI is what you should be ideally using for, right, hardcore troubleshooting, right? When you move into an L2, more than L2 level troubleshooting, right, most of the stuff is achieved via CLI, right? You cannot move forward on the GUI in terms of advanced troubleshooting. So there are a lot of commands, right? So as you said, right, there are the diagnostic commands, right? The packet diagnostic, people who are not aware of it, right, packet diagnostic is an advanced debugging solution, right, that Palo Alto offers, right, and that typically is like a golden bullet when you troubleshoot any kind of traffic problems. So when you suspect the firewall to be doing something wrong with your packets, right? And you don't have an answer from all of the other troubleshooting, right? Or you reach out to TAC and they're not able to help you. The last thing that they'll do is to take a diagnostics, which gives a gigantic output of what the firewall is doing with your packet. It talks detailed about what all functions, what all changes are being done, right, in the packet processing as such. So this was previously public, right? People have been in the industry for some time. They should know this. So when you Google search packet diagnostics from Palo Alto, right, there was a public KB article from Palo Alto, right? But sometime back, right, this has become internal. The reason being that a lot of engineers, right, who work for the companies as such, right, not for the tech folks, right, people who work supporting firewalls, right, Palo Alto firewalls, they try to use these KB articles to troubleshoot, right, themselves. And what happened is they ended up, right, creating a traffic outage. So the diagnostic is something that, right, is like a final solution that typically people go for. But right, it comes with a lot of responsibilities, right? If you don't do it correctly, there is a good chance that you might create a network outage, right? You might be putting your firewall under too much stress, right? So that's what a packet diagnostic is in terms of Palo Alto. And because of this, right, these lot of issues reported from the field where people are trying to take a diagnostic ending up causing network outages, right? They decided to make it internal, right? So typically TAC team only takes those kind of output. Why? Because from an end user perspective, right, me as a network engineer for, let's say, company ABC might find it a little difficult to understand that data, right, the diagnostic output, right? honestly, right, it's not that user friendly, but it's in English, right? So you can read it and find out. But the TAC has an advantage of they have detailed documentation on this. They can do a cross search, right, on similar tickets, all of that. Right. So, just to summarize, all right, give you an answer for that question, right? So, how do you gain that knowledge on what command to use, right, and when to use it, right? That typically, right, needs little bit of experience. What I say is, right, in my initial days as well, it was very difficult for me to, right. I was a Cisco guy, so when I came to Palo, right, the CLI commands was weird, right? The whole pattern was different. So it is difficult to start with, but when you do this on a daily basis, right, or when you read these documentations and right troubleshoot one or two issues, it gets burned into your memory. And specifically for tech people who do it on a daily basis, right, these commands will be like phone numbers, right? You know those commands by heart, right? So that's how it works, right? So as Sajin shared right on the chat, there are cheat sheets that you have, right, which has all the CLI commands. You can refer to that. But right, and it is very hard to remember all the command, right? So there is a good function in the CLI called the find command keyword on the CLI. So right, if you don't remember it, use that functionality. And it is not right, ideal for anyone to remember everything, right? It's not possible, humanly not possible, right? So we rely on such help, right, to get the required CLI command, right? My suggestion, or right, my 2 cents on this is to remember a keyword for any right important command that you think would become handy in the future, right? So any keyword that you think, right? So let's say I'm talking about um, let's say session logging, right, or logging level for different daemons. If I don't know it, right, I don't know the entire command by heart. Instead, what I do is find command keyword, and the keyword that I have learned is logging hyphen level. That is there in the command. So if I give that, it will spit out a list of commands which has this keyword, and from there I can just identify what command I'm looking for, right, which is very useful, right? But does that answer your question, Abhijit?
All right. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Yeah. Mudasir also our private member. He will be in with us the continuous training program as well.
All right.
Just want to add. Yeah. Also, I just want to add one point. So we actually put the answer to the Mudasir is also in the chat. There are cheat sheet at Vinit said. You can use that. Basically, show commands you can generally run to see what are the config,
Right,
and
right.
there is a find
Actually,
command you can use.
the thing is like I have gone through the training. I know the Vinit has told that
Mhm.
we need the find command keyword. I used to do
Yeah,
that, but there
yeah,
is a bunch of commands came into the screen, and then exactly which command I have to, which command will give me the exact result. I mean, that's also quite difficult
yeah,
for
yeah.
a new persons. Who are
Exactly.
True.
That's true. I
Abs-
mean, as Vinit said, it will take some time to understand the concept and the flow. Where do we start? Actually, maybe we are looking for only one command output that may identify the problem, right? So that comes with experience. Obviously, we need to know the concept and an existing command, and then you find that command and basically run that command to get the RCA for that, or maybe the information, right?
Right.
So
Definitely, right.
yeah.
Yeah, just to add to that, right, you should have, right, a OneNote or an Evernote session, right, or a notepad, right, session of, right. So what I had to do, right, in the initial days was to, right, as everyone does in the industry, keep notes of, right, those important commands that you think that would become handy, right. Right, as an engineer there, right, sometimes you fix a problem with right, a specific command that you learned from the support, or right, you learned it from one of the similar tickets or a KB article, right? You think this is handy, so you make a note of it, right, in your personal notes, right, and rely on that in the initial days, right? With experience, these kinds of notes becomes, right, outdated for you. Why? Because right, you have this burned into your memory, right? So there is no shortcuts to that to identify which command, right, is for what. That comes with definitely experience, right? But there are public ABs that you can always refer to, right? So if you know a keyword, right, I can always search, right, user ID, right, the specific keyword. There should be a document, right, by Palo Alto, ideally, right, for only specific commands. We might not find public facing right, documents as such. All right.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
All
So
right.
also in the chat, I pasted our public links where you can reach Telegram and LinkedIn and YouTube channel and contact number because it's often difficult for us to reach you because the the groups we are part of are being restrictive, or maybe because we are starting they are actually uh, does not allow us to do anything. So if you can follow and share these links, maybe we can reach out you guys, uh, and we can create a community to better help you as well. Just to add that point.
All right. We'll do that.
Great. All right. Open to more questions, right? You can bring up with scenarios, right? Any
Yeah, I
common.
do see Jay and Chandrasekhar have raised their hands.
All right. We'll move.
Any one of can ask. Chandrasekhar is again our private member.
Hey, hi Thomas. Hi Vinith.
He's on
Hey.
stage.
So
Go ahead.
yeah, I work for Capgemini for the operation part,
Mm-hmm.
Palo Alto on ICE. So
Cisco
my
Ice, right?
question, yeah, sorry,
Okay, great. Cisco Ice, right?
yeah, correct,
Okay,
correct.
great.
Only the
Okay.
operations part, not the
All right.
implementation. So,
Mm-hmm.
coming to the question, so let's say in a firewall decryption happens. So if the decryption is not done for one point, the session will be offloaded, right? So in
Yeah.
that, yeah,
Go ahead.
in that case, how the Palo Alto will going to secure the interesting traffic?
Yeah, so typically, right, the SSL sessions which are not encrypted, and when you have a physical firewall which has the capability to offload, which means which has a dedicated chip, right, or an ASIC chip, right, to offload, called known as the offload engine, right, the firewall will decide to offload it, meaning that this traffic goes into or is processed completely by a specific FPGA chip, right, without any kind of layer 7 instruction. So it just checks into the source destination IP, the source destination ports, right, and the protocol, right, and see if it is allowed, right, if the session is there. Okay, great, allow it. Right. And this is done by not just Palo Alto, right? All vendors does this. Why? Because they want to save up resources, right? So
Correct, yeah,
session offloading part, right? When a session is offloaded, when and this is for SSL specifically, right? Not non-decrypted sessions would get offloaded on a physical firewall as such. So in that case, right? Let's say there is a threat happening, right? Let's say through that traffic, you're downloading a file which contains a malware, right? The firewall is not doing any kind of L7 inspection on that. So at that point, let's say you're downloading a malware, there is no way the firewall can identify or block it. Why? Because it's encrypted. First thing, it is encrypted, right? Even if we send it for layer 7 processing, the content and threat detection engine, right, which uses the SP3 architecture, would not be able to find that there is a malware. Why? Because it's encrypted, right? And
correct,
since it is offloaded already, right, the firewall has made a decision that it will not do layer 7 processing because there is no use of doing it. Why? Because it's encrypted. So, right, to summarize, no session offloaded, yeah, no security on L7. It's only the L4 processing that we do. So if the IP or the port or the protocol is not allowed, it can block it. That's it, right? What is inside the payload is not inspected anymore.
okay, okay, got it. So in that
Yeah.
case, it will be compromised, right?
Correct. Yes.
Yes.
That's a
Yes.
compromise, and that is why we suggest, right? We need SSL decryption in enterprise network. Right? There's no point in keeping a big firewall like Palo Alto without, right, having SSL decryption in the picture.
Correct, correct. But in that case, let's say if you're putting decryption for all the interesting traffic, so let's say company knows the legitimate traffic going to the website. So CPU hike will be rises, right?
Yeah,
If you're putting decryption
definitely.
for that traffic. Yeah,
Definitely, the decryption would put an impact on the data plane, right, of the firewall. But that is a decision that when you buy a firewall, you make, right? So let's say I have 1,000 users in my company. When I approach the Palo Alto sales team or the reseller, right, I'll tell that, hey, I have 1,000 users, right, in my company, and I want to secure them, right, and I want to have SSL decryption capability. So I'll be definitely making sure that I buy a firewall which is able to handle those 1,000 sessions users, right, sessions from these users, right, and do decryption as well, right. I don't buy a firewall, right, which is under capable or incapable of handling SSL decryption for such a traffic. right?
Okay,
So
okay,
from a design phase itself, right, you need to do that. You don't buy a PA 220 for, right, 100 people, and because SSL decryption is putting DP under load, right, you compromise on it. That is just, right, a non-conventional approach, right, of dealing with security,
correct.
right?
Okay, yeah, got it.
Right. All right. Let's move to the next question, Jay. I think you had a question, Jay.
Yeah, I have a question regarding virtual system. How session offloading works in there, and how routing works between them. Means we want to send some data from one VYS to another one. So how do we do that?
Right, okay. So VSys, right, virtual system is a concept of dividing, right, a single firewall into multiple virtual firewalls. So you can assign different interfaces to, right, different VSys. So typically, right, in managed service providers, right, MSP companies, right, they do this, right, who provide Palo Alto firewall security as a service, right? So
Yes.
large companies cannot, right, buy or is not having that kind of money to buy a firewall, right, and secure. So instead they go with an MSP who will provide that kind of service, right, where they will say, hey, I need 100 Mbps, right, throughput, and I need two interfaces, right, to secure my network, right, and this is, and also the support, right, and the config management, and as a package deal, the MSP sells it. So when you divide, so let's say, right, I have a PA 50 to 50, right, let's say, and I'm dividing it into, right, two or three pieces, right? So the let's say I'm the MSP, I'm setting it to three, or dividing it into three pieces. I can onboard three different customers, right, into these three visas. So there is a separation between each visas. So traffic from visas one will not be seen on visas two, right, unless you have explicit routing setup, right? So the VSys is dividing the firewall, right? Interfaces, the policy base, all of that. So each VSys will have separate set of interfaces, right? Separate set in the sense your firewall might have 8 interfaces which you're dividing, right? It not, so there is no E1 bar one in VSys one and E1 bar one in VSys two, right? So the interface numbers would be different, right? So E1 bar one and 1 bar two given to VSys one, 3 and 4 given to VSys two, right? Like that. So that would be the segmentation on the firewall. But how do you handle the routing? That's right, using the virtual router. So ideally, Palo Alto firewall ships with the default VR or a virtual router, right? Which is the single routing domain that it uses. So when you have a VSS environment and all, you use a new VR, or you create a new VR and associate those interfaces. So let's say VSS 2 has Ethernet 3 and 4, right? Ethernet 1 bar 3 and 1 by 4 as part of it. So I'll create a new VR and attach E1 bar 3 and 1 bar 4, right, interfaces to that VR, right? I'll call it company 2 VR, let's say. So all traffic coming in, right, through E1 bar 3 or 4 will be forwarded based on the routing information of VR 2, right, the virtual router 2. So basically, your routing domain, you are creating separate routing domains, VR1, VR2, VR3, and these virtual routers are associated with the interfaces. So any packets incoming or outgoing, right, through any of the interfaces will follow the routing information in that VR. So if I have two VRs, there are two routing domains. So for VR1, they have a separate RIB, right, routing information base, a
Yes.
FIB, a forwarding information base, right? VR2 has a similar RIB and FIB, so it acts as a separate router altogether. So when you have a V2 multi VSys environment, right, what you do is you have two VSys. Let's say you create two VRs, associate each VR to each VSys, and right, you set up your routing so that VSys one traffic can go out through the other interface in VSys two. There are exceptional scenarios where you need traffic from VSys 1 to be sent to VSys 2, right? Or VR1 to be sent to VR2, right? This comes not between companies, rather between department and all, right? You might have a specific business use case where you see that there are multiple departments and they want to have a clear separation between their traffic. But in special scenarios, they want to route the traffic from one department to another department, right? On a business use case. In that case, you use a route called an inter right VR route. So you can add a static route on your routing table, telling that right, this packet or packets towards this destination should be sent to the next VR, and you can point it to the next VR. So right, through this logic, right, inter VR routing, you can actually make the traffic from VSys 1 go via VSys 2 as well, right? And there is other approach as well, which is through wire looping, right? I hope you understand that. So if I loop a wire from VSys 1 interface to VSys 2, that also, right, it can be achieved, but it's much, right, efficient to do it using an inter VR, right, routing. Why? Because you have more control, and right, it does not need, right, or needs an interface to be wasted for that. Make sense? Does that answer your query? Yeah.
Yes, but what is session offloading in ways? Means means if we want to specify like ways 1, 2, ways 3. Means should I do static route only or dynamic routing? Is it also possible? So static route is like we destination, then we use next VR feature. But
Yeah.
how do I specify it? Reach to specific ways.
No, dynamic route, right? You cannot be pushing, as far as I know, right, through the next hop IPs, right? It's not a next hop IP that you need, right? So with the dynamic routing, you're pushing next hop IPs, right, as the destination. So inter VR routing is typically done with the help of an static route, right? So that this option is only there in the Palo Alto firewall. So you cannot tell your nearby Cisco router, right, to inject inter VR route using BGP, right, or OSPF, right?
Yeah,
So
makes
that
sense.
that would be difficult. Yeah. So it's the static route that we use typically for people who have worked with dual or right, tertiary ISP, right, active standby setup and all. So when you have two ISPs and all, right, if the primary ISP goes down, you might create inter VR routing to route all your traffic from the primary ISP towards the secondary right, secondary ISP, right? It's possible, and they create, right. So it's all around, right, playing with the route metrics, right? You can create a default route with a lower metric, or higher, right, higher metric in the sense lower number, numerical value, and make sure that, right, that route is selected. In case the default route fails, right, so you can set up static route monitoring, right, to monitor the destinations or the ISP reachability and all, and you would have a second route pointing to the same destination, or a default route, right, with a higher metric pointing to the next VR, right? So we can read on it, right, on the inter-VR
And the
KB.
PBR also we can use in this or
Yeah, PBR also you can do it, right? So when you do a policy based or PBF, in terms of Palo Alto, we
yeah, yeah,
call it as a
follow to
PBF,
PBR.
right? So packet based forwarding, right? You, what you can do, or policy based forwarding, right? What you do is, for interesting traffic, you can define a policy where you say that any traffic coming from trust to interest, right, for this application on this port, right, from this source IP to this destination IP, right, you want to forward it to a different interface. You can point it to the IP, right? But typically, it, right, an inter VR routing, it is done using the static routes, right? PBF also you can use. You have monitoring, right? PBF monitoring logic as well in the PBF policies, so that is also achievable. I've seen PBF in use in terms of primary secondary tunnel failovers and all, right. They might do it. There is a more neat solution for IPsec tunnels, but for, right, GRE and all, right, they might use different PBF logic to do. But yeah, technically speaking, yes, it's possible.
Yeah. Actually, I put a article on the inter VR routing. Basically, we'll have a zone. Again, it's a zone based firewall, right? So it will have the zone. So with that zone, you can control, I believe. So it explains, that article actually explains how it is done as well. You can refer that to if you haven't seen that. There are more as well.
All right.
Have to check this out.
Haha.
That's good.
Okay.
Are you clear on the session offloading part, Jay?
Yeah, but one thing actually I was asked this question during somebody asked me, but
Hmm.
I didn't have answer. Like he said, like session offloading when you do on this, you need to be careful because it can cause CPU issues and all that.
True, that's true, right? So I'll give you a practical example, right? So by default, when you get a firewall, right, session offloading is by default enabled on it, right? Every vendor has this technology, right? I'm not talking about Palo Alto. They want to, so they want to basically save the resources from the firewall, right? By not doing unnecessary computations for traffic, which is not going to yield any result. So encrypted traffic, whatever you do, you're not going to get any right threat from it. Why? Because it's encrypted, right? So session offloading is right typically done for encrypted sessions, which SSL sessions which are not decrypting. So what happened, right? What you're referring to is for troubleshooting purposes, right? You would temporarily disable this offload function, right? Why? Because in Palo Alto, the packet capture functionality works on the data plane, right? That means any packet going through the data plane only you can do a packet capture. So when you do a packet capture for a session, and let's say if it is offloaded, your capture will not show any packets. And you would be wondering where my packets went. Yeah, right. You would see on the client side the application or the web page loaded, everything is working. But on the packet captures, nothing is seen, right? You'd be wondering where the packets are going. But actually, what is happening is the session might be offloaded, and because of it, it's not coming to data plane anymore. It is handled by the offload processor, right? So it does not enter the data plane, and hence the PCAP functionality would not work. So in such cases, right, what we do is we go ahead and disable the offload functionality for troubleshooting this particular problem, right? We want to take a capture, but offloading is hindering that. So we give a command, set session offload no command, right, which disables the offload functionality of the Palo Alto firewall. But right, this command has a huge impact. Why? Because when let's say you're at the time of the troubleshooting, let's say right, you're doing it on a Monday morning, right? Let's say 10 a.m. and you have let's say 9,000 sessions going through your firewall right now, right? When you give this command, what you're telling your firewall is don't offload anything. That means even if the session is encrypted, send it to data plane. Do all kind of processing there, right? So what that does is all those sessions which were offloaded now has to come to data plane. So your data plane load from 9,000, right? It might see a hike in the number of packets, right? Let's say the initial packet rate on the data plane was just let's say 9,000 packets per second, right? But now as soon as you give the session offload no command, you would see it bumping up to 10 or 11 or 12k depending on how much traffic you have, right? Which were offloaded. So that puts an impact, a sudden impact on a data plane. So this command is not advisable. Before running this, you might have seen support doing right a few checks. They check what is your current data plane usage, right? They don't suggest doing right set session offload so, no command when the data plane is above 9095 and all. Why? Because there is a good chance that you can crash the data plane, right? When you give that command, immediately DP will hit 100, packet loss, and possibly data plane crash also, right? Resulting in complete network outage. So it is not advisable. So data plane usage has to be right looked into, right? That means DP CPU, right? Data plane packet buffer utilization, right? Packet descriptor utilization, all of this is analyzed, right? Making sure everything is right well below 80 and all, right? And that is when, right, you can go ahead and set session of node, right, to know, right, to troubleshoot this. But ideally speaking, the suggested right logic for session offload is to have it enabled. Why? Because it's not a compromise at all, right? You're only offloading sessions which you cannot identify any threats from. So there is no security compromise you're doing, right? You're just saving resources, right, on unuseful computational task, right?
Great, thank you.
Yeah, right. All right. All right, guys. Right, the session offload. Right, I think this is an interview question. I don't. If you guys have right got it in any interviews, do let me know. Right, because I have at least right taken two three interviews and people have asked me this question. Right, do you know
Yeah,
what
yeah,
is session
yeah.
offloading?
Baj
Right,
asked on interview
right.
this one.
Okay, okay. Yeah, because right, it's there in every vendor, right? Not just Palo Alto. Every vendor uses this, so there's an important functionality, and people are doing wonders in terms of hardware to improve that performance of offloaded sessions, right? That FPGA which takes care of this offload session, right, can handle 10 gigabyte per second or right 20 GB per second. This is all an improvement from an hardware perspective that they're doing, so that they can offload more and more traffic, right? Yeah. All right. Right. We've opened forum again, right? Any questions? Right? You can bring up with. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yes, we need regards to this session offloading.
Hmm.
So, is it means that like if we are not enabling the decryption, those sessions will be get offloaded? I mean, those sessions will come to the firewall and directly push to the network processor. Is it
True.
like that? I mean,
Right. For a physical firewall, right, when you don't have SSL inspection, right, I'm not saying that on the initial packet itself the firewall do it. Why? Because the firewall does not know whether it is even SSL, right, or it's right encrypted. You have a decryption policy or not. So the session would be installed. It would take, right. So there's no fixed number for this logic, right. It
mm,
depends on application to application and all. So it can be 5 packets, it can be 10 packets, it can be 15 packets, right. But ultimately the firewall, if it sees an SSL session which is not being decrypted, right, and the firewall has the SSL offload capability and it is enabled, it's going to offload it. So basically, what it does is the data plane will send, right, or update the network processor has a session table inside it as well. So it adds a flag to that. It sends a information to the NP saying that, hey, add a flag called cut through, right, telling that, hey, don't send this traffic anymore to data plane. I want you as a network processor to handle it. I don't want to see this traffic anymore on the data plane. And this is a right message coming from the data plane towards the network processor, right, to
mm.
basically tell that this packet, right, what you're sending to data plane is not making any sense because it's encrypted and it's not yielding any result as such.
All right. So the packet is first coming to the network processor, then to the data plane.
Correct.
Okay.
Right, the packet flow is in that logic every time, right. The NP gets it, NP
Hmm.
looks into the table there, right, and sees if there is a cut through flag or not. If the cut through flag is there, it means the NP should handle it. That means it's an offloaded session. There is no cut through flag, it will send it to the data plane, right. So if it's a first packet, it will be broadcasted to all data planes if it's a multi DP platform. If not,
Hmm.
right, it will be sending it to the session owner, right. So in that session table in the network processor, it will have the owner, the data plane who owns that session. So he will be sending a unicast or forwarding this packet to that particular data plane to handle it.
All right. But this cut through flag is set on set by the data plane, or I mean, how, who is informing that?
Yeah,
Who is
data plane informs the network processor to add this flag.
okay?
And you have a command, right? I think that's an advanced command to dump the the session table from the NP, which shows the cut through flag. Right, that's an high risk command as far as I know. Right, so in lab firewalls you can see, right, this working when you have physical firewall, right. You can run this command, right, for an offload session and see, right, a cut through flag for offload sessions. And easiest way to I mean there are ways to identify it, right. Do you know how to see anyone from this batch, right? I mean, you guys, how do you identify if a session is being offloaded? Let's say I give you a firewall which has 10,000 sessions going through it, and I give you a session number, right? Let's say session 123. How do you tell me if it is offloaded or not?
We can see if the decrypt packet is checked or not in the session log.
True, true. That is true, right? If it is decrypted or not, right? Yeah, you can
Yes,
say that. But let's
if
say,
you
as
can
I said,
show session ID, then session name, then we can check.
Yes, under the below. I mean, where it says C2S and S2C, then down that we are having that hardware offloading enabled or not. That could be where we can check.
okay, that is the hardware offloading enabled or not is actually in a different command called show session info, right? Which shows the global setting if session offloading is enabled or not, right? If you give the command show session info, right,
Hmm.
there is a line called hardware session offloading, true or false. True means session offload is enabled. That means set session offload, yes, command is run and it is enabled, which is ideally what should be the condition. If you disable it for troubleshooting, right, hardware offloading will show as false, right. That's right, during troubleshooting and all you do this. But from a session, right, if you go to the session table, show session info for session ID 123 on the CLI, you would see a line called, right, layer 7 processing, right. There is a line called layer 7 processing which shows, right, what processing stage of layer 7 it is doing. So if it shows completed, that means it is offloaded. Layer 7 process is completed, right. If you see,
Hmm.
right, in any of the sessions layer 7 processing completed, that means that session is offloaded. There is no more layer 7. If the, that means Layer 7 process is completed and the session is still going through. You see active right packet count increase happening. Right, that means session is still going through, but right, the layer 7 processing is completed. That means right, the firewall is not doing any layer 7 processing. It's handled by the data plane. Sorry, by the network
Network
processor.
processor. Oh,
Right. There is a command as well to dump it from the network processor, right? But not advisable on a production firewall. Right. Yeah, but yeah, this
okay.
is very important, right? I think I've seen a lot of people, right, struggling when they're on a call, troubleshooting some problem, right, and we try to do a PCAP and it's not seen, right, and we're wondering where it has gone, right, and we double check the IPs, triple check the IPs, not working, right. It could be session offloading in pay, and it's right. Show session info, right? Sorry, show session ID output, right? You can just verify and see if it is offloaded. Right. But yeah, but this is important, right? Do ensure that when you get into a troubleshooting call, right, before you go out, make sure that session offloading is enabled back on. Else, right, people do this mistake as well. They might set up a maintenance window to troubleshoot something, right? They disable session offloading, take the captures, debugs, all of that, right? And bid farewell to the customer and come home. What happens is session offloading was not re-enabled. The next morning, Monday, the normal traffic comes in, the firewall is unable to offload because you have not enabled it back on. And as a result, data plane would be high, resulting in right network outage. So have this in mind whenever you come out of on a call, right? Make sure that session offloading is enabled, right? Back on. Cool. All right. Okay. Let's take more questions, right? I mean, where do you think is? Yeah, go ahead, Jay. I'll give this time right to Zain, right? I think let's give everyone a single chance and then move on. Yeah, Zain, go ahead.
Okay, so how do Palo Alto checks TCP and UDP? Is there any difference how Palo Alto check means up to layer 2 to layer 7, identifying application, session offloading, and everything? TCP and
So
UDP sessions.
yeah, so see, the the protocol identification is done by the IP, right? Header information. You have the protocol numbers there, but there are L4 transport layer protocol validations like the checksum, right, for TCP, UDP, all of that happening right on the firewall. But the actual application identification is common. The algorithm for identifying an app, let's say, right, let's compare HTTP and DNS. Right? DNS is based on UDP, whereas HTTP is based on TCP, right? So when the firewall is getting it right, it does not identify the application, right? In and this is a global understanding. TCP three-way handshake, whenever it's happening right through the firewall, the application would be undecided, right, or it is not yet known, right? Because TCP three-way handshake on port 80 is not considered as an HTTP or web browsing in Palo Alto. Right. It's this is a signature-based application identification engine that we have on a PA. So it looks for the right packet signatures to identify right if it's a specific application. So definitely right that is something you need to consider right when you think of TCP or UDP. So what happens is let's say for DNS, the first packet would be a DNS request, right? The DNS request when it comes to the firewall, right? Yeah. Somebody had a question? Okay. All right. I'm just gonna. Okay. Let's. Yeah. Right. If you have a question, please unmute and ask. If not, right, please stay on mute. Right. Okay. So when let's say the first packet for UDP, so UDP is right does not have a connection oriented flow, right? That means there is no connection establishment as such, right? The first packet itself has the DNS payload, right? A DNS request there. So when that comes into the firewall sends this packet to the app ID engine, right? The application identification engine, right? So this engine is going to use a pattern, right, matching algorithm, right? Uh, right. People from computer science background should know about this, right? DFA, right? Deterministic finite automata, right? DFA, right? In the Turing machine and all, you might have heard it. So the DFA algorithm, this is right an open source algorithm that is used by multiple vendors, right, for different use cases here, right? Palo Alto, right? DFA algorithm, right, is a pattern matching algorithm that they use to match with the signature. So when you buy a PA firewall, right, they and the all the subscriptions that is required, they give you these dynamic updates which contains app id signatures. So all those applications that you see in the Applipedia, right, they have well-known application already identified by Palo Alto. So they have created signatures for all well-known applications, Google based, Facebook chat, right, Facebook videos, all of that, right? So inside Facebook itself there are multiple signatures, right? So inside Google itself there is Google Drive, Google Images, all of that, right? So these are all unique signatures created for all of this traffic. So what happens is when that UDP DNS request comes in, the firewall is going to use that, right, database of signatures and do a pattern match, right, using the DFA algorithm. So it's going to check your layer 7 data, which is your DNS payload. So right, what you're looking for, right, it's um a name record value, right? So you're looking for an A record or a 4A record, right? The DNS would be for an IPv4 resolution for a domain, or an, right, IPv6 resolution, right? A or 4A record. So the firewall is you looking into that layer 7 payload information, right, in the DNS headers, and comparing it with the signatures that is there. So the signature is itself is proprietary. No vendor is going to talk about their signature. Why? Because if I tell what is the signature used to identify, right, DNS, right, that's a problem with competition, right? Any other competitive firewall vendor can use the same logic, one thing. And second thing, it's a security thing, right? So when you say what key components is Palo Alto looking for to identify a traffic as DNS, then an attacker can craft a packet which has those parameters but has additional parameters for malicious activity, right? So it's also a security risk. So these information are proprietary, but they use this, right, pattern matching algorithm, right, on the layer 7 data to see, right, identify what application. So it's going to do this pattern matching on all of the applications, right? And finally it's going to find out, okay, there is a pattern match, right, for application number 15, let's say. And right, what is the application 15? It's DNS, and that's how it identifies. And if it is not known, they will classify it as unknown TCP or unknown UDP, right? You might have seen this, right? Companies who are into development background, right, they create their own applications and all, right? And Palo
Yes,
Alto does not
yes.
know about it.
Like even SSL traffic is known as unknown SSL traffic sometimes because it's internal app, so we need to allow based on ports rather than
Okay,
application.
non custom ports, right? Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes.
Definitely, right? So could be happening, right? Typically, when you see an SSL signature, right, it would identify SSL. Typically, it would be able to identify it as SSL on port 7000 or port 8000. That's possible, but yeah, unknown SSL specifically, right, could mean that you might be able to decrypt it, right, or it's not able to have a perfect match with the signatures as such, right? Yeah. So this is quite common, right, in any development related, right, companies, custom application, something that you do. And the solution for that is an app override policy, right, to basically reduce that impact on that application engine, right, of doing signature match for these applications.
Yeah, adding that point, every vendor have their own technique how to identify TCP and UDP traffic. Like it is a common data structure for TCP or UDP. So every vendor have a, they know it's a basic thing to parse the TCP header and know if it's connected or not. Also, if for UDP, if they do see two sides of a connection, that means it's connected and established. That so that's being identified in TCP and UDP, and then the application thing which we need set is unique about Palo Alto. So they actually samples, they parse it, they pick a sample, and they move to that algorithm. If you see that, so this can be easily seen in when we actually doing a packet diagnostic. So there is a called app ID basic. When you do it, basically we have a bunch of database with that particular pattern of the applications. So when you actually read through that, when you debug it, we can see that which application is identified. It's actually matching with multiple application. Let's say Zoom Web and Zoom Mobile may be different. So we can see literally it's matching, it's not matching, and finally it's matching Zoom Web kind of things. So that's what it's happening in high level. Um, just to add that point.
Thank you. One more thing, like in TCP, we use like three packets actually: SYN, SYNAC, acknowledgement. So
Yeah.
in UDP, only one packet is needed to identify. Like it won't have all these things. Just IP packet, based on IP packets, it would identify, or any other things needed.
We can't.
Uh,
Go ahead. Go ahead, Sajid. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I don't not sure about UDPs, but some vendors use, if they see two sides of two side, I mean, client to server and server to client, that means they see this there is a session, then they identify. But I don't know about Valor too.
Yeah, the UDP
Okay,
part,
side.
right? Typically, it varies, right? So for DNS, at least, right, the first packet would be enough to identify that the application is DNS, right? But let's say you take an RTP traffic flow, right, in or any other UDP protocol, right, for any applications, right? That might not be identifiable in the initial packet itself, right? It might take two or three, four packets maybe to identify it, right? So and this number, there's a fixed number that, hey, at first packet of UDP or second packet of UTP, right, the application would be known. That will vary depending on, right, application to application. But at least for TCP, right, we know for sure that in the initial three packets, right, TCP, send plus ACK and the ACK, it does not contain any layer 7 data. So at this point the firewall will never be able to identify an application, right? It won't be able to identify that application at all, right? It would be treated as unknown TCP, right, or undecided. Application is not decided yet, right? Only from the fourth packet onwards, it can be an HTTP get, it can be an FTP request, it can be a SSH, right, request, or it can be a SSL client hello. So depending on fourth, sometime fifth, sometimes sixth, right? So there is no hard and fast rule that from fourth packet TCP would be identified, or from fifth packet TCP, or second packet UDP would be a no. This will vary depending on application. So uh, when your application identification fails, let's say in second or third or fourth packet flow, right? You, and if you see the session, you will see insufficient data in the application field. That means the session was not the application was not identified because we did not see enough application data payload, right? Maybe it got two or three packets. There is no hard and fixed number for identifying UDP or TCP based applications. This will vary application to application, right? And typically SQL, SMB, all of that, right? Bulkier traffic more, right, often takes a little bit more time to identify applications.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you, guys.
right. Yeah, Zain, I think, right, you have a question, right? That's long pending. Go ahead.
Yeah, like phase one is a successfully up, but phase two is a down. What needs to be troubleshooted? Which parameter need to be checked?
Okay, okay. So this, right, this is an IPsec question, right? And Zain is asking, right? He's asking about, yes, right, trying to form a tunnel, right? And his IPsec phase one is up, phase two is not coming up, right? So all of you might have come across these kind of things: phase one down, phase two up, phase two right? Phase one is not coming up, or phase one is up, phase two is not coming up, right? Or both are not coming up, right? Different, right, permutations of this. So this question specifically is about P1 is up, P2 is not coming up. So, right, there are some preliminary questions or details that we need on this, right? So, what is the other VPN vendor, right, in terms of this tunnel, right? Is it a PA firewall that you have on the other end, or is it some other vendor?
Same window.
Same vendor. So Palo Alto as such is a policy based, right, VPN device. Sorry, route based VPN device. My bad. Right. That means it uses a traffic selector called 000. That means all traffic. So it announces the capability to send any traffic through the tunnel by default. Whereas legacy devices, right, which is a policy based VPN device, uses an ACL, right? So based on your ACL, the phase two would negotiate the ability to carry whatever is the subnets that you define in the ACL. So that's one important the question that you should always ask when you have a phase two problem, right? So phase two can, right, is not coming up due to multiple reasons. So there might be a phase two parameter problem, right? You know the haggle in P1. Similarly, phase two also has encryption, right? All of that, right? You can have PFS enabled for phase two, right? The PFS, the DP-Hellman group should match, right? And all of that phase two parameters should be verified. The second part is to have this information about if it is, right, the proxy ID, or we call it the traffic selector. In Palo Alto, we call it proxy ID. The generic term is traffic selector. So if you have Palo Alto to Palo Alto, both will use 000, right, the default traffic selector. That